Guys, in about 1 minute, we're going to go ahead and get started, so go ahead and find your seats, please. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and get started and see if we can get back on time. Anybody get the joke? No? Nobody? Guys, I have the great pleasure of introducing Scott Horton today. One of the highlights of my time with the Libertarian Party of Delaware was being able to bring Scott out to one of our conventions in 2022. He left a mark there. He influenced our people, and that influence has continued because when Scott speaks, when Scott asks us to take an action, like contacting our representatives to talk about Yemen, our people in Delaware act. And I'm sure he has had that same impact here in Texas. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Scott Horton. Scott, thank you so much for being here. Why don't you come on up? I've heard that before.
Well, hey guys. Appreciate you joining me here, us. And I forgot my joke, so I'll just go with the old one that I wasn't going to say, which is, I'm very sorry about my hairline.
Just got one.
Yeah. I'm not close in the mirror. I kind of think I'm getting away with it, but then when I see it from far away, I go, oh, no, that's really bad. Okay, anyway, it's kind of funny. Look, so I just want to talk about the Mises Caucus and the Libertarian Party for a bit today. First of all, we're endorsed by the great Ron Paul, and for very good reason. And what we're trying to do here is carry on the Ron Paul revolution, like it says on my man's shirt over there. Like it says on most of my shirts. Really. So it's a hell of a legacy, and you know, he's still kicking, of course, and doing a great show every day. But as Clint was talking about earlier, a major part of our obligation is being truth tellers. And that really was what was so special about Ron Paul, was that, and for people who weren't really libertarians even, they could just tell, wow, this guy really respects me enough to tell me the truth, unlike everybody else on the stage, obviously, in comparison. And that was what meant so much, is he was willing. In fact, if you think about the Giuliani moment, where his real breakthrough was he was feeding the American people the most bitter pill of all, which is that American foreign policy, Bush Sr. and Bill Clinton's policy in the Middle East, had led to the September 11th attack, the Al-Qaeda war against the United States under W. Bush, and then the reaction to that. And so nobody wanted to hear that, but in a sense, they were happy to hear it because they knew it was true, and they were happy to see somebody respected them enough to tell them the truth about it. And to see how important it was that they understand the truth about it. So anyway, I think that's a great, baseline for where we're going. But then, and who we are and what we're doing. But I want to talk about some of the recent successes lately. I'm writing a book right now, and I've been very distracted, and so I haven't been able to keep up with the news in real time. But I had a great talk with Michael Heiss, and he was letting me know about all the great progress that the Mises Caucus has been making since the takeover of the party last May. We have 300 candidates or campaign managers that are up and ready to go in local elections across the country right now. And they're training twice a month all over the country, those candidates, and helping. And that includes with the help of the 10th Amendment Center. And I know you guys heard from Michael Meharry earlier today about a lot of that. And they're the real experts. And of course, Diego Rivera is here from Bring Our Troops Home. And that's something that the Mises Caucus has been a big part of pushing and really helped and can take credit for helping to get the full Senate in the state of Arizona to pass Defend the Guard last month under a barrage of phone calls led by Defend the Guard and by the Mises Caucus and the Libertarian Party. And Diego is also a great, political trainer for those who are running for office or learning how to influence political officials getting involved. They're spearheading efforts to recruit new LP members all across the country, and they continue to take over states. And he rattled them off really fast while I was still writing this part, and so I didn't write them all down. But he said that it seems like they've taken over. We, the Mises Caucus, have taken over 4 or 5 states, more states just this year, and we fended off attacks and kind of counter revolutions in a few states as well. So our position is strong. And the new generation of leadership of the Libertarian Party is here and here to stay. And then the new project is called Project Decentralized Revolution. And this is, basically fessing up to the fact that the national government and its power is so far removed from us and ours that, there's only so much shouting at a brick wall that you can do. Shouting into the wind that you can do. But there are also so many issues of liberty in the society that are taking place on the local level where we really can have an effect. And, Diego asked this question earlier and was alluding to this. And I think this is really important. I know from doing my radio show all these years that when I talk to activists on Capitol Hill, even in Washington, D.C., they will say that, listen, don't underestimate it. The phone calls really make a difference. And now it depends on what kind of a margin we're talking about, what kind of a volume we're talking about of calls and on what issue. It's no magic trick, but it very clearly makes a difference whether the people care about this or that issue and whether they're making themselves heard or not. And that is especially true on the local level. And we saw this in Arizona, again, just a few weeks ago when we passed this Defend the Guard legislation. We had a great kind of Twitter swarm built up and Facebook groups, and Diego and Defend the Guard led the phone banking. And we just got people to pledge that, yes, I will call the following 10 numbers 10 times. Let's do it, right? And then, so we all did it, and it worked. And we got the staffer of one of the most powerful senators on tape. I don't know, how do you say it these days? Just on audio? I'm old. We got the lady on tape saying, geez, it would be political suicide for us to vote against this thing right now. Are you kidding? It's been like a tsunami here all day. I made up the tsunami part, but anyway. Because it was all on talk radio, and so it was a big deal for a week or so in Arizona, and the full Senate passed Defend the Guard, not just a committee. And so there's, major momentum there, but it just goes to show that that kind of pressure can really help, especially when we're talking about on the state level. These politicians really can respond to that because money only goes so far, but money can't just buy off a small state congressional district full of humans with real opinions and interests, like our Gun Owners of America friend talked about up here before. They can only do so much smoke and mirrors and claim calendars committee before people really know what they're up to and can hold them to account and can differentiate between which members of which party are doing the right thing and which ones aren't. So there's a lot of potential there. And then I guess my point is that as many of you guys as possible really should consider running for office on the local level. If you could get, run a credible race for county judge or for city council or for mayor in I guess probably smaller towns it'd be easier, but I don't know. Especially people with real roots in the community. And then what I found just, from doing this work for a while, I think, as we get older, everybody, starts to realize time really flies. And people who were just kids the other day, they end up being the founder of an organization later and end up being a state senator after that and end up, you never really know. Things go by really quickly. Jeff Frazee, who's the founder of Young Americans for Liberty, when I met him, he was an undergraduate in 2004 at the Texas Libertarian Party State Convention. We were all hanging out with Ron Paul in the hallway, shooting shit. And it was a great time. But he was just a kid. And then he later, 4 years after that, he founded Students for Ron Paul during the revolution. And that ended up becoming Young Americans for Liberty, one of the most important organizations in our country right now, right? So the thing is if you get involved now and you can get elected to county judge, maybe you can turn that into a state house seat a little bit later down the line. And maybe you can turn that into a state senate seat a little bit further down the line. Another thing that really hit me recently, I don't know if you guys heard the news, but I think this is, in a way, it's funny and tragic at the same time. But Ted Galen Carpenter, the best foreign policy guy at the Cato Institute, got fired from Cato, which is okay because now he writes for me at antiwar.com and at the Libertarian Institute. The reason that they fired him was because he's good on Ukraine. He wanted to stay out of the Ukraine war. In fact, he's the guy who literally from even the days of Bush Sr., before Bill Clinton even came to town, he was warning, we better not expand NATO into the former Warsaw Pact states. We're going to end up picking a fight where we have this great peaceful victory, and we shouldn't do it. This whole time he said it, literally this guy, as good or better than any other foreign policy pundit in the country. And what happened? You guys remember this? About half a year ago, a bunch of libertarian organizations that none of us have ever heard of from Eastern Europe all signed this giant letter saying, how dare Cato betray us when we're all trying to rally together to fight and support Ukraine against Russia. And it was signed by, I'm making these up because who knows what they are, the Ludwig von Mises Institute of Lithuania and the Libertarian Institute for Austrian Studies of Hungary. And then there was like 75 of them. Like, who are these people? Is there really that big of a libertarian movement in Eastern Europe? I don't think so. I think these are all just front groups. This is all the National Endowment for Democracy, funding these groups basically, and using our good name as, the same way our politicians, commit all their violence in the name of freedom and democracy, self-government and free markets and the rest of this. They, use our name to support the empire, the American empire in Europe and against their enemies. And then, so what did Cato do? Cato went with them and overthrew Ted. Anyway, that's not even the point. The point is, look how effective it can be if you have just these small AstroTurf organizations, but that you can count by the couple of dozen. And, from all around, in this case, Eastern Europe, but if you just mirror image the thing, just think about all the libertarians that we have in the country who could each have our own group of some kind, and I don't mean just fake little AstroTurf things, but I mean real grassroots organizations. But go ahead and incorporate, make it a thing, and sign some people up, make it a pressure group, and keep it outside the party or make it an adjunct to the party or however the legalities work. But then again, with a real lesson here to me, the way time flies, you find out that those little things can grow into really big things. I created the Libertarian Institute with Sheldon Richmond and Will Grigg back in 2016. And Will turned around and died on me half a year later. And I wasn't sure if the thing was going to be anything at all. And now I got a really great team of guys, including, the great Jim Bovard and now Ted Carpenter and Lori Calhoun and of course still Sheldon and a great group of young guys writing. And we're now, I don't know, peers with the others of the best of libertarian groups out there, I think, with The Great Fee, edited by Dan Sanchez and other things like that. So, get started, run for office, create a group, do a thing. Don't just be a supporter, but be an activist, get involved, found a thing, get some bros and make them your partners in it and do something. And then, stay at it and be surprised how quickly it grows and what comes out of it. Also, before I forget this, I know, I'm sorry, I didn't want to skip that. There are so many things on the local level for people who run for local offices under decentralized revolution. Obviously, education is huge right now and all the controversies going on there, but there's always taxes and regulations and opportunities for nullification. And, if you think about, like, for gun control, for example, what a city council or a county board could do to obstruct prosecutions of people for nonviolent gun crimes, gun possession type crimes, to nullify things like that, or to attempt to obstruct, or just even, think about any single city council meeting and what it would mean to have one libertarian up there to just say, absolutely not, we are not doing that, whatever it is that they have on their mind that day. The minority wedge, when they put their foot down, can really have their way. So it really is worth it when you think about all the stuff that's at stake right now to try to get involved. Also, there's the extortion strategy. You guys must have noticed how the Texas Republican Party is absolutely terrified of us right now. And they are like, trying to change the law to make it more difficult for us to stay on the ballot. The Texas Libertarian Party is now trying to sue to prevent that. And they fought this last year. They got to fight it again. So the GOP, they're terrified of us. Possibly they perceive the potential power of the Texas Libertarian Party in ways that have missed us. Maybe they really see the wedge that we could use against them. They're really trying to nullify that, to prevent that from really, taking place. But the thing is, they're right to be afraid if we're organized and if we're vindictive. And if we, for example, like the guy from the Gun Owners of America who spoke previously was talking about, being a member of the Republican Party is no guarantee anybody's good on guns at all. You have to discriminate between individual members of the House and the Senate and what their positions are and how they behave on which issues and use excuses and that kind of thing. Well, we can do that too. We can be just like that, and we can specifically target the worst Republican candidates, and we can also hold our fire. And we can prove that we can be nice guys if they're willing. And I don't mean sell out and compromise our principles away. I'm not saying that. I'm saying find a way to stick our principles to them. That, look, if you guys will, one, always, stay good on constitutional carry and guns and things like that, support defend the guard legislation, and I don't know, you guys pick your favorite, state issues, 2 or 3 of them, 3 or 4 of them, then we'll stay out of your way. And in fact, we might even disrupt the Democrat and run somebody to his left in the next election if we really like you. And so give them a reason to understand that we can play hardball, but we're willing to play ball. We can either split the vote against them and run to their right and help the Democrat beat them, or we can not do that, depending on their behavior. But we have to be willing to play that card, and we have to have the numbers. But it really only takes a few percent to pose a credible threat. And their fear of us and the way that they behave trying to keep us off the ballot is all the proof that we need of that. They know it's a matter of a few percentage points here or there, and they're out. And for some reason, they really want to stay in. Okay, and now here's some advice that I don't really follow that well. You guys know I just sit behind a microphone and write books and all this stuff. But my buddy Eric Ayers spent a lifetime in libertarian politics, and he told me that one of the most important lessons that he learned was a lot of times it's the case that it's a lot easier to make an activist into a libertarian than it is to make a libertarian into an activist. So some of us, we sit and do our little thing, but some people are out there doing the shoe leather thing because they just can't stand sitting still. They would rather go and be active and organize and shake hands and do the meetings and get things done. So, and the thing is, people like that, when they are exposed to libertarians and libertarian ideas on their issue, I'm like, oh, I keep seeing libertarians show up at all my pro-gun stuff. And then you know what? They had some pretty interesting stuff to say about gold money and foreign policy. And that's how, we get somebody to go from somebody who's already an activist to now a libertarian one without having to convince them to get going in the first place. And I admit that I'm an example of that. I'm not nearly as much of a run for office and collect signatures and all that kind of stuff. I'm trying to help as much as I can, but we all have our part to play. But it just goes to show that I know enough stories like that. I know there are enough libertarians who that's where they came from, was being a single issue guy on one thing, or girl on one thing, and then ended up finding out about libertarianism on the rest and becoming important parts of our movement. I have a dream that the Libertarian Party on the national level can figure out how to be organized enough and nimble enough that we can really be like a great transformer and change from one, and I really mean this in the off season. Obviously electoral politics time is electoral politics time, but there's a lot of time where we really could just be a gigantic pressure group. And we got something like 30 or 40,000 people who are members of the party or on the direct email list or whatever the organization is. And these aren't just libertarians, but libertarians who signed up to be a part of politics, to do something about it through the Libertarian Party. That's why they're all on that list together. And we really did a great job on Defend the Guard. As I was saying a few weeks ago, obviously the Libertarian Party across the country came together to try to support the Yemen resolution in the House and the Senate last year, which of course Biden and Sanders ruined, but it's still a great effort. And it did help to send an important message to the Saudis and the UAE that the American people and especially the American Congress are, unhappy with what they're doing and wanted to see an end to it. So on the margin, that was definitely worth the effort. And it does go to show that we are capable of organizing like that. But I just think that we ought to be able to do that all the time. So like if they're trying to pass a red flag law in Ohio, that we could just organize the entire National Libertarian Party and say through our emails and through our social media groups and so forth, that look, for the next 3 weeks, we are all just going to do nothing but write letters and write emails and make phone calls and contact, media, radio, and politicians and everything we can do. And we're just going to stop them in their tracks. We're not going to let them pass that red flag law. We knock that down and then we go on to the next thing. I think something that is really important to almost all libertarians in the country is Ross Ulbricht sitting in prison. Like, we should be organizing a massive effort some of the time. It can't be the focus of all of our attention all the time, but they have 200,000 names on that petition. What can we do to get that to 500,000 names? Or what can we do to, put pressure on the U.S. Attorney's Office or put pressure on the senators from his home state or something to try to get an effective change on that. There are so many different things, and libertarians, we're good. Oh, and of course, this one is huge too. And on the local level, on the state level, this can be done. And that is getting states to adopt, as specified in Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution, that states can coin their own money. They can't print it, but they can coin gold and silver currency. And there's going to be a time when we're going to be glad we got them to do that before it was too late. So this is something, and it also draws a lot of attention to the problem and the solution to the problem of the boom bust cycle and inflationary money in this country. So, things like that. I know, obviously, I'm a foreign policy guy, and I'm always going to ask y'all to try to support a war powers resolution. There are obviously a lot of other major issues among libertarians, and I just think that if we practice that, okay, what are we doing this month? This is the month of free Ross. What are we doing this month? This is the month that we're really trying hard to push hard money in the state of Indiana. And after that, whatever it is, and see where we can really intervene and, make those calls. Again, just the phone banking and that's just a start, but that's enough to really make a difference in a lot of these cases, as Diego Rivera was saying before. That's Diego Rivera from defendtheguard.us. Okay, and then I guess I'm done, except to say at the very end here that with Donald Trump still in the race, back in the race, and with now Robert Kennedy Jr. in the race as well, and Joe Biden just getting worse by the day. If we all survive for another year and a half, this entire election season, which has already begun, is going to be an absolute circus. This is not like W. Bush versus Al Gore snooze fest where, wake me and let me know what happened later kind of thing. This is going to be completely bananas. So that means that all eyes are going to be on us too. So we have to set a really good example and just keep telling the truth. Stay anti-government, stay against compromise, and push hard for freedom and for peace. And that's it. Thanks.
Scott, thank you. And thank you again for bringing up the Mises Caucus candidate program. Scott's right. Our goal in 2023 was to get about 100 people signed up who were interested in becoming endorsed candidates, or who were interested in managing or volunteering on campaigns. And right now that number is over 350. Thank you so much, Scott, for bringing that up again. Our caucus candidates kick ass. I have the great pleasure of working with candidates right here in Texas, but all across the country. And we are putting candidates at the local level who are absolutely going to exact that strategy that you heard Harry talk about. So that's something to look forward to. If you don't know about it yet, you can sign up at runasklibertarian.com. You can run for office. If you don't want to run for office, you can support the campaign of someone who wants to. So something to keep in the back of your mind. A couple of months ago, the Mises Caucus board was meeting one evening, as we occasionally do. We were talking about making sure we had awesome speakers lined up for these events. And we were filling in some gaps. We have our folks who are with us all the time, who are known as kind of our keynote speakers. And someone said, who would be awesome to have? Who would just be so cool to see with our banner behind them, someone who could come and speak to some of the most timely issues. And someone said, Ian Crossland from Timcast. So this is good. We can certainly try. We can see if he is interested, and he was. And I'm so glad that he's here today. So we can start to bring Ian up. Ian. So this is Ian's first event with the Mises Caucus. Again, one of the speakers that we are absolutely thrilled is with us. He is a journalist and a writer for Timcast, an outlet many of us know and love. And I'm told he might speak a little bit about graphene today.
If you want me to.
I'm here for it.
Let's do this.
Ian, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you guys so much. Stop my motherfucker. Too loud. Let's get fucking loud for a minute. Because what we're doing is staying calm. The really things we say are important, but the way we say them are equally as important. In China, the languages are tonal. If you say a word differently, it has a different definition. And whether we think that way or not, it does. I think it's a lot about why my physical health is important, because when your body's healthy and your gut's clear, people can hear that you're speaking from the soul, and they know that you're being honest. And when people know you're being honest, they're going to be willing to listen to you, and they're going to be willing to move with you. And Scott, he wore his maroon shirt and a black jacket. I wore my maroon jacket and black shirt, and we didn't coordinate logically, but I think something actually did coordinate us, Scott. Maybe it was God. Scott mentioned money earlier. I want to kind of talk about money. What's money? You know, money. It's a technology that was invented at some point in human history. Before that, they didn't use it. They used other barter and things like that. And I think that we're going to get to a point where we evolve past money, or the idea of currency is going to evolve. Like, what is currency? But a flow. So, like, what's the current? Electricity. I think we're moving towards a system where we're actually going to be trading things that we need directly to each other. Cryptocurrency is kind of it's a step towards that, although I don't know if it's trustworthy or not. I mean, I think artificial intelligence might be able to break the code on that and twist it all around and make us think we got what we don't. So I'm bullish on electricity right now, and people creating their own electricity, maybe with their own vibration, piezoelectricity, things like that, but controlling your own currency and your own form of trade. I like that a lot. I talked to Ron Paul like 3 weeks ago. Lucky me, he on Timcast, Tim Poole and Luke Rutkowski and I had the opportunity to interview Ron Paul. Dude's fucking amazing. I've loved that guy since like 2008. I was like, this guy's gonna bring balance to the force. This is Darth Vader. So I went all Obama, because I was like, Obama's charming. I like Obama. I'll get behind Obama. Obama, you'll win 2 terms. But the reality was, I think Ron would have brought balance to the force. He would have issued in a great reset, maybe in a way that he wanted to see it happen. I asked him if we could bring this thing in for a soft landing, this economy. He just looked at me very soberly and said, no. If it was 1921, maybe we could. I think with the current technology, if you only think about it in terms of what we have and what we have had, he might be right, but we are advancing technology pretty rapidly, and I truly believe that people will be able to power their own systems without money relatively soon, if not already, people that are off the grid completely. And we might end up building a system where we barter and trade, that kind of thing. Geez, I had some notes. What should I talk about next? You guys want to talk about graphene? I have solutions. So, okay, people might be freaking out, like the world's gonna end or shit's gonna go bad, but it's not. What we're gonna start doing is pulling carbon out of the air, carbon dioxide, converting it into stuff graphene, which is this monoatomic, like a flat one atom layer of carbon molecules that are shaped like a, oh, am I out of frame? What's up, dude?
You're fine. Do your thing.
And it's like a honeycomb, like a flat honeycomb. And it's got these incredible electrical properties. It's conductive, like copper, like more conductive than copper. It's capacitive, like a battery. You can bend it around like paper. It's stronger than steel, 200 times stronger than steel by weight. You can pull it out of the fucking air. And what's gonna happen is we're gonna create an industry, a global industry, where we start pulling carbon dioxide out of the air and making this stuff. It's like a 21st century building material. And we're gonna start competing with trees. So we need to build some sort of global coalition to make sure that we don't pull too much carbon out of the air, create an entire new problem. So this climate change thing, we have to be one with the climate, but we gotta think long-term as well. Let's see, what else is good?
What's the holdup?
I'm sorry, say that again, Clint?
Yeah, what's the holdup? Like, why?
I think the steel industry and the copper industry are afraid of losing a foothold right now because the copper wiring is going to be replaced with graphene wiring. It'll be wiring where like you can detach it like a magnetic wire that you can pull apart on any point of the wire. You can have like a wire that's that long and then like magnetically stick it back together for your wiring. And the steel industry, obviously, but I think we can repurpose the copper. You can actually use copper to deposit the carbon dioxide for graphene. That's one way to reuse the copper. I actually wrote some stuff down because I want to talk about some stuff. Oh, you know what we need to do is a fucking rock show, because I'm talking about tone. We need to bring people together and vibrate them and put them in a state where they're willing to listen or where they are easily manipulatable. And you gotta, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because right now I'm manipulating you with my voice. This vibration is changing your DNA. It's changing who we are just to hear sound. That's a form of manipulation, but it can be done justly and kindly and in a way that gives people the empowerment. Like the individual, you should be the one that controls your own destiny. But if you can inspire people to follow you into a system where they control their own destiny, I think that's one way to do it, because not everyone's gonna think that deeply into it. And that's why I think music is so powerful. So I want to see like a 40,000 person rock show and then just talk about property rights and gun rights and the First Amendment, free speech, which brings me to my next topic, which is freedom. Freedom is kind of vague. Freedom, I think like a deer in the woods, is free to run for its life and to get shot and killed and hunted and eaten. Like good freedom. That's actually, we in the United States have like our own version of freedom. We call it American freedom, and it's protected by law and order, which is kind of strange, because like if we had no law and you walked around out there, someone could kill you and take your property, and that would be you wouldn't be free to move around. So we've created rules and restrictions that allow us to exist in this sense of freedom that we have, and it's important. And on the internet, so what I do, I co-founded Minds 11 or 12 years ago with Bill Altman. Yeah, dude, you know what I'm talking about. Diego, everybody. And I'm obsessed with the idea of freedom on the internet, what that means, free speech on the internet, for instance. I don't think it means that we got to tell private companies what they have to let us do because they're private companies. I like the idea that someone can spin up their own social network and ban whoever they want. I like that because it gives the individual the power to create networks and police their own networks, which we need. But when you're on the internet, I think it's a human right to know what these computer systems are doing to you while you're using them. When you have large systems, you need to be able to see the source code. And my idea of freedom or free speech on the internet, free enterprise, is that when a network becomes so large that it's functioning in the commons, you have the right to know what it's doing, all of it. So we need to have that code free. And when you see what the code is doing and you can use it for yourself, you can spin up your own network, your own version of it. It creates like a marketplace of terms of service and a marketplace of censorship laws and regulations, not a marketplace of who owns the code, because the richest guy is going to own the code every time. So it actually levels the playing field in a way that I haven't seen much out of Congress yet, although I've been going to Congress a lot. We went down and interviewed Matt Gaetz. We talked with Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Thomas Massey. Dude, Massey is a dude. We talk about like Republicans and libertarianism, dude. Massey's the linchpin. I mean, he's just one of many. I don't want to put too much weight on that guy's shoulders because I hear a lot of libertarian ideas coming out of the Republican Party, at least the Freedom Caucus, like localized government, self-control, like building your own empire from the ground up, but also using the network of politics and legalism as needed. Because if someone's shitting in your water supply up north, we're going to have to go make them stop. And that's what law is good for, and order and restrictions and things like that. So I think that it's very possible that I never really got into political parties in general. I'm like, why? I don't need the cult. Why don't we just do it? Like just make it happen. You have internet video. Speak to 1 million people. But like, this is a party. We're fucking partying right now. Are you having fun?
Yeah.
And there's value in coming together. Whether or not we slap a label on it and say, like, now it's a political party, now it's not. When a bunch of people get together and share ideas and evolve each other, I think that's the key. I've kind of been getting out of politics, though. Like, I'm more focused on art and entertainment right now. I just spent some time with Blaze in Dallas last week, working with Alex Stein. If you didn't see Alex Stein, Primetime 99, check it out. He made some hot music. And I'm very much of the mindset that we need a new network, an entertainment network, maybe bringing together the four I think of as Timcast, Babylon Bee, The Blaze, and Daily Wire, because I know those people and they want to make movies. So we start pumping out entertainment, then people love you and they want to work with you and they want to know what you know and they want to know what you ate for dinner and they want to eat that food and they want to vote the way you voted and understand you and why, things like that. So that's like another form of tone setting. That's really important. And that's on the horizon right now. That's going to be huge. That's like, I think Scott, you were talking about like getting the message out. How do we get the message out? It's through the media. It's through arts and entertainment, in my opinion. That's one way. And the other way is spirituality, which is genuine. Because if Jesus Christ was alive today, they wouldn't have killed him. He'd be able to continue to speak. It was the fucking empire that killed him. It was the emperor. They were afraid he was going to become the emperor. So they killed him. We don't have an emperor right now. We have a republic, and we're going to keep it. We need to, no, we don't need to, but I think there needs to be some sort of religious reformation where people start to see what God really is, which is, I think this, as quantum physics develops, like the cosmic microwave background radiation, they've got these radio telescopes where they can see the leftover radiation from the Big Bang, and it's like a neural net. It looks like this web of energy, and it's like pulsing, which makes me think like the fractal nature of reality. I often think about that, like blood vessels look like star systems. And that maybe we're actually figuring out that God is tangible, or at the very least observable, at least from one perspective, because then what's going to happen is you're going to see it from an even closer perspective, and it's going to be a bunch of spinning subatomic particles, and then we'll get even deeper and we'll realize, well, what we thought, it's even smaller than that and smaller than that. But when we can bridge the gap between religion and science, I think people will get on board and start to realize that God is real and that your actions have consequences, grand consequences across the universe. Like there's this guy, Nassim Haramein, who's a quantum physicist, His work is incredible. He's got this paper called the Schwarzschild proton, where he's calculated that everything in the universe is equally dense. The vacuum itself, quasars, they're all equally dense. And every proton is 2 protons spinning around each other at the speed of light, but it just looks like 1 proton. What's happening is the proton is spinning around into the vacuum, depositing information into this system, and then coming back and repositing the entire system's data to you locally. So what's happening over there is affecting you here. And I think it's worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize. This guy, he's like the Einstein of our generation, but it challenges a lot of modern physics. So I haven't seen people jumping at the opportunity to have him displace the current model, but Nassim Haramein is the one to look for. And I think hopefully in the next 10 or 20 years, he'll start to get the attention he deserves. But it's an example of how your intentions, your behavior. I mean, I look at like, God, this is a rabbit hole. I think I've only got like 10 more minutes to go on this fucking hole. The double slit experiment in quantum physics, where like if you observe particles, they form into a pattern, but if you're not observing them, they're just a cloud of possibility that maybe your intentions, but for sure your actions are affecting everything, I think. Everything, it's a vague term. But it seems to be the case that is true. So just your thoughts are altering reality, which is why meditation is so important. I've been practicing meditation, and what I do is, first what I did was I went on the internet and started making internet videos, and I was like, I'm just gonna tell people, because I would get thoughts would pop into my head. I'd be in the middle of listening to something and I just think about something from my past. I was like, fuck this. I'm gonna tell people what I'm thinking. So I made videos and I would tell them it was humiliating, which is like humility. And then the thoughts stopped coming into my head. Like I purged it by telling the universe about it. And then when I stopped having these thoughts come into my head, I had the opportunity to have a quiet mind. And then I could control my thoughts. I could think words like, hello, good to see you. And so I said the word hello, then I thought the word hello, then I thought good to see you, then I said good to see you. When you can think something like healthy and then have no thought, and it's like dropping a pebble in a pond and it ripples. So if you have a thought and you keep thinking it, it's like dropping a lot of pebbles into a pond and the ripples start to interfere with each other. But if you have a singular thought and then clarity, it gives an opportunity for the ripples to span out across the verses, the universes, the multiverses. It seems to be the case. And I think a lot of it comes down to faith, because I haven't been able to prove any of it, but it's had a sort of calming effect on my environment, almost like a spiritual shield. That's, again, the term spirit is kind of, everyone kind of defines it in their own way. Well, maybe talk about a couple other solutions that we could do. There's this thing called iron fertilization. I don't know if you guys heard this. You grind up iron into powder, like iron oxide, and then you put it in the ocean, and it causes plankton blooms in the ocean. So you can regrow huge amounts of plankton, which then creates fish food, and you get these huge fish blooms in the oceans. So we can regrow the fish population across Earth to feed us, to feed the growing population as we get older and greater and grander and wiser. And we have 20, 30, 40 billion people on Earth. We can keep feeding them by continually fertilizing the ocean. In fact, Antarctica has this thing called the River of Blood, where it's actually pouring iron-rich water out into the ocean right now. I think because it's anticipating the glaciers melting, and it wants to make sure that there's going to be enough iron in the water for the plankton. I don't know if it's actually a living organism, the Earth, but it certainly seems to be sentient or doing stuff without us having to mess with it, and it's fertilizing itself right now. So we can do that. We can speed up and kind of oversee the fertilization process to control our food supply. There are a couple other ideas. When it comes to the coral reefs, maybe you heard that coral reefs are dying off or something like that. You can do this stuff called microfragmentation, where you shatter a bunch of coral and then put all the shattered pieces near each other underwater, and they all grow together and reform into a large coral reef again. The issue is you need polycultural coral. Like the coral reefs are a bunch of different types of coral, all living like old growth forests. So regrowing that at face value, it might be a challenge, but over time, I think if we have like different cultures of coral shattered and we microfragment them, that we'll be able to regrow like the coral reefs again and create new habitations underwater. And all these technologies can be used on Mars too when we start terraforming it. When we start heating it up, there's all this ice under the red dust. I think what happened was like 4 billion years ago or something, some planet, some large planetoid came flying through the galaxy or the solar system, smashed into Mars and skidded across the surface. You see this giant that trench along Mars just ripped open. The guts of the planet spurted out, and all this magma iron just fell all over the planet. Now we've got the remnants of the iron dust all over the planet. It's like it was gooed out, but there's all this ice underneath it. So if we can heat that up, that ice will melt and the iron will go back into the water, create all this plankton. It's like dormant and ready for us to light it up. And then we can use this regrow coral and stuff, and then get the fish going there. And then I think, well, we can seed bomb the planet too, which is where they retrofit C-60 bomber planes with seeds, billions of seeds, trees and flowers and plants, and you just fly and just drop them from orbit or from the sky. And you can plant like, I don't know the exact number, hundreds of millions of trees a day. It's not as effective seed by seed as doing it on your own hand by hand, but you can plant so many more that if even 100th of them take hold, you're planting 500,000 times as many. And so we can regrow forests that way, not necessarily old growth forests, which is why the Amazon is so important. And taking care of old growth is important because they're habitats of their own. But we get to start by regrowing the trees on Earth and on Mars. And I also want to build a space elevator. You guys familiar with a space elevator? Space elevator is like a giant tether that would be connected to a platform in geosynchronous orbit, which is an orbital platform that moves exactly at the same speed as Earth, so it's always above the same spot. And you would make a tether out of, I think, graphene and some sort of graphene comboid or something, like really, really strong metamaterial. And I can see like 60 elevators at once, all going up and down all day. And this would be at like 40 degrees north latitude and south latitude. It's like not quite at the equator, it's just above and below. And you can slingshot these things up or vacuum them out so that you can get a lot of lift on these elevators going up. And then you can just, condense them with air and the ballast and bring them back down as needed. And then we'll just start creating in space. And once you're in space, size isn't that much of an issue when you're building things. Like when you start constructing like drone construction, swarm construction, you can have like 100 million drones all working in synergy to create like mega structures in space. So you can put together feasibly planetoid-sized structures pretty rapidly. Yeah, space and time are relative. I think I would need acid to go deeper on that one right now. Maybe 20 minutes. And I'm serious about that. Yeah, I would not lie to you about that. Did you guys have any questions?
Yes.
What's happening, bro? What's happening?
All right, first up, that was awesome. But two, is there any downside to the open source? I know it's being formative with minds. Is there entrepreneurial incentive if you are able to patent the code? That if you get away with that, will that limit innovation?
Thanks. That Clint Russell, ladies and gentlemen.
Hey.
This guy, yeah, it's up on its face. Yeah, if you said every code has to be free all the time, then yeah, people wouldn't even be able to get started because as soon as they made it, someone would just take it. Someone with a lot of money would take it, hire a bunch of engineers and build it better.
Exactly.
So I'm only advocating for freeing the software code of extremely large networks that have entered the space of what we consider the commons. 100 million users a day, Facebook, Twitter, Google, things like that, Alphabet. Once they're that large, I think it's a public duty. Like you can't own, just because I built all the roads, 100 years ago that my great-grandfather built all the roads, doesn't mean I get to own all the roads forever. Like, at some point, society and humanity needs it more than I do. Also, when you're freeing the software code, it's important not to just make it open source, because if you make code open source, it can be taken and changed and then made private again. So you want to make it free, which is a type of software license. It's AGPL3, Afro General Public License, the third version of it, where any changes that get made to the code remain public. So anyone that wants to change or tweak or add on to these public systems, all their changes are also public for anyone else to take and add on to. And then you're creating like a kind of a web of creation. Yeah.
Do you know names of businesses or organizations in particular working on some of the solutions you just listed off, like on the plankton blooms with iron oxide, anything like that? Are there some businesses or orgs you can shout out?
Yeah, there's one called EcoPhene. It's ECOPHENE, and they're pulling carbon dioxide out of the air and turning it into graphene. And they can also pull methane out of the air and turn it into carbon dioxide, which then can be converted into graphene. There is a guy that was fertilizing the ocean off the coast of Washington State, like 5 or 6 years ago, if you look up the story, and they had a surprisingly large plankton bloom and then salmon growth. Like, I remember the 20 times the expected return on the salmon, some number like that. I don't have his name off the top of my head. Space elevator, there's a guy named Michael Lane, who has a company called Spaceport. He used to work with NASA, and they're developing first a space elevator on the moon because of the low gravity. It's easier to experiment with. And they were, last I talked to them, which was about 2 years ago, looking for a tether. What materials are we going to use for the tether? And I think that graphene or some sort of phene is the structure. Phene, so you have borophene as well, which is boron, but it's the same honeycomb structure. And it seems to be this hexagonal lattice structure has its own value. So it doesn't always have to be carbon. But it seems like graphene or borophene offers some, because then you can use the piezoelectricity, which is what compression can actually create an electrical charge. You can, the tether itself will produce electricity just by bouncing there. It might even be able to conduct lightning. At this point, I'm like, I look at the ocean and I'm like, well, there's our water supply. And I look at the lightning and I think there's our electricity supply. It's just a matter of storing it, capacitating it and storing it. And graphene might be key towards doing that. And I think that's all in regards to companies. That's my hand going somewhere. My glasses, what's happening?
Yeah, I had a question about Mars terraforming. It doesn't have an atmosphere. And this question is just curious how you're going to fix its atmosphere and its magnetic field. That's why it's not an atmosphere anymore.
I think if you superheat the planet, it will release a lot of gaseous hydrogen because of all that ice that will thicken the atmosphere and potentially kickstart the core. I don't know if it will get the core moving again, but I was reading something a few months, maybe even 4 or 5 months ago, about the core of Earth and how it's more connected to the magnetic field than we realize. So if we can give it a jolt, it might actually get the core moving, and then once the core starts moving, that will hyper-accelerate the magnetic field, which will hold the moisture in. Elon mentioned nuking the poles, but, oh, and that's something I want to repurpose our military-industrial complex to get it away from blowing people up and have it start building drones, drone swarms, just billions of drones that we can take out into space and blow up, put onboard AI on these things, so it can, and like targeting lasers, not any weaponry on these things, just give them targeting lasers, so we can fight them, they can fly around and tell us what we're doing wrong, and how we can get better at destroying drone swarms, because the real threat in this next century is drone swarm warfare. And that's a good use of AI. There's a lot of terrifying aspects of AI, but that'd be a really good one. I think, and then that could get, because the military-industrial complex, I don't think they want to kill people. I know they like testing their weapons on people with other modern weapons because they can see how effective they are. I have a feeling that that's part of like the glee of making weapons. But I don't think they want to kill people necessarily. They want to profit and they want to make better weapons. So if we can make it more profitable and blow up less people, that could be a way to actually become president and help not kill people. What's that?
So graphene seems like the answer to a lot of modern problems that we hear about. Do you think it's primed to be stigmatized like nuclear power is?
Yeah, I saw a lot of stuff about graphene oxide in the vaccines, and I just kept seeing stories and stories where there probably, there could be, but like any technology, like steel, you wouldn't inject steel into your veins, you wouldn't eat steel. It has specific value, graphene has specific value, but never put too much weight on any one item or thought or value, because if you do, then someone's gonna come along and try and pull the rug out from under it, and they might actually, they could be right about it. We'll only wait and see. We got to start producing it in mass, and then we'll know. Over here. What's that?
Hey, Ian. I would like to chat with you later if I get a chance about minds.com and maybe getting a libertarian party presence on there.
Yeah.
I think, and I'm curious of your opinion, it might be a really good energetic counterbalance to some of the internal conflict that we have within the party. I feel like maybe it's a completely different energy, and it would be a cool experiment to see us take some of that off?
It'd be great. And we're working at Minds with this protocol called Noster, which is setting up for decentralized communication so that things aren't even on servers. Like that's one big part of the ethos of the Minds infrastructure that Bill and I kind of created on the way up is we don't want the data. If you have the data in a central system, that's a choke point for the FBI or the CIA to come take it. So it's better that people have their own keys and are able to communicate. Like the messaging's encrypted, we don't have that. And there's also a crypto token, but it's a utility token. It's not a security. So it's used to get views on the network. You earn tokens by using the network, then you can spend tokens on the network to publicize your stuff. And I think that's a step towards self-reliance, self-righteousness, that kind of thing. So yeah, I'll talk to you later. Thanks, Angel. Is there somebody else that raised their hand over there? Yeah.
I just want to say real quick on Mars. There's a great book called The Case for Mars, written by Robert Zubrin. He's a legit rocket scientist. I think at JPL before he worked or something like that. And he lays out the entire case, how you would get there, how you would do overlapping missions, and build up a whole base before anybody actually moves out there. And he's got a whole chapter on terraform. And part of it is melting the poles. Mars does have an atmosphere; it's very thin, but they do use parachutes, when they send explorers and stuff.
Yeah.
But you melt the poles, which are frozen carbon dioxide, so now you have an atmosphere that you can fly airplanes and helicopters and stuff. It's not breathable, but you can go outside without pressures. You just have to have something to breathe.
That's
I don't know what link, but the book is really good and it's written by legitimate scientists. So I would definitely recommend it.
And in addition to the carbon dioxide and the poles, the whole planet's ice. It's basically under that red dust. I don't know the whole planet, but there's so much ice.
Mars there too,
Yeah.
As far as atmosphere goes, there's a lot of carbon dioxide that's frozen in the soil.
Talking about how to get there and back, I'm fascinated with these orbital slingshots, like electromagnetic slingshots that can like either take something up into orbit and sling it to Mars super fast. And then once it gets into the Martian orbit, you'll have like a reverse slingshot that catches it and slows it down magnetically. So we could send stuff hypothetically, hypothetically at light speed, but we need to talk to Jeremy Riss, the alien scientist, to go more into super cavitation of space-time. But at the very least, get stuff there in a matter of days or weeks or something like that. Yeah, I think they're called, space slingshots or something like that. Well, did anyone else have any final thoughts? I saw a hand go up over there, but I didn't catch it. You guys, this is fucking great. Thanks, Amy. All right, take care of yourself and your loved ones. Thanks. That was wild.
Guys, we're going to do about a 10-minute break, right? 3:10 right now. Maz Toure is going to walk through those doors at 3:20, so have your butts in your seats.